you. So I want to talk about the concept of atomic leadership, which is something that I think is going to be the sort of approach that we're going to need going forward. This is a bit political, so apologies if it offends anyone, but first of all, just say it's great to be with you. Getting ready to do one of these things is almost as exciting as going to get my click and collect. Moving on, I will start. I'm going to talk about some research that one of our students has done. My presentation will be 20 minutes of what you might call a concoction, a taster, a number of slides that sort of come together in a rather perhaps odd way. But first of all, before I do that, this is emerging. It's not formulated yet as a research paper. My book obviously is, but the idea of atomic leadership is still developing. But first of all, I just want to give a shout out really to everyone who's teaching at the moment, whether it be school, university or colleges. I don't think there's been enough acknowledgement of the risks that people are taking to get out there in the classroom. And I just wanted to acknowledge that and thank everyone who's doing that. So as I've said, this concoction is based on what we call the Kellogg model. I want to sort of look at logic models. I want to focus on the Kellogg one. It fits my ideas. As we know, logic models are hypothesized descriptions of causality resultant from theories, scientific evidence, assumptions and beliefs. So this Kellogg model fits really what I'm trying to do here, working at the macro level, advocating small-scale interventions in their ability to create organizational change. Even before COVID-19, I think we could really say the world was off its axis. Things felt disturbed, uncomfortable. Patrick, in his presentation, talked about VUCA, a term thought to have developed from the Iraq War. Volatility, uncertainty, complexity, ambiguity. We were certainly seeing war, destruction, forest fires, mass exodus and displacement of people. In 2015 in Athens, I saw refugees outside railway stations. I was privileged to go in 2016 to an installation in a church in Piccadilly that represented and showed some of the shoes and mobile phones left by refugees in Lesbos. The world order certainly seemed askew. This humorous slide, if you like, hopefully one of those in the middle there has gone now, but and then on a lighter note, I do have to say, how on earth could we get to a position where world leaders of the free world were called Boris, Donald and Justin? And again, then moving more, I couldn't resist including that in my presentation. I want the Statue of Liberty poking its head round there. But moving back to a more serious note, at this time we had concerns over nuclear power, forest fires in Australia, California, south of England, concerns about deforestation, climate disasters, and one sort of protest from young people. The end of complacency, I felt, as the young people did begin to take time off school and begin to protest about our treatment of the planet. And at a more local level, back in the UK, definitely, Gove, I think probably the most hated Ministry of Education ever, who last month on the Andrew Marr show wouldn't talk about the impact of Brexit because the government needed to get back to its major reforms underway in our education system. This really rather concerned me. And from my, the need for us to become more like China, from my experience of working in China, This is an education system that produces great mathematicians. If I'm ever teaching maths teachers in China, if I break up my teaching with a little bit of brain gym and a little bit of math, they become so excited and animated. But otherwise, there are some major concerns, I think, about an education system which is obsessed with testing, experiences high suicide rates amongst its students, reinforces disadvantage, and fails to acknowledge difference as something that should be celebrated. And again, my visits, I have to point out, I do work part-time, so that does give me an opportunity to see lots of interesting things. But the Magna Carta for 2020, I saw this in 2018. All children in all education institutions will exercise their right to learn without exams. Well, I suppose this did happen in 2020 as a result of COVID, but not with very positive outcomes, with the disastrous summer results in O and A level candidates. And an interesting comment from Philip Pullman, who children's author, once was a member of staff at the Westminster Institute, really bemoaning the mechanistic culture of tests and league tables. I think I did miss a slide there, I'm sorry. I just wanted to go back to some research we did in the School of Education back in 2016, where we looked at the innovation overload. So all these innovations were required of our teachers, leaders in 2000, between 14 and 16, major reform of the school agenda. And this is the sort of reform and change that Gove is advocating when this is all over. And I'd like to just mention the poem by W. Yeats, published just after the last major pandemic, can't say the word, which had 4 waves. This poem presents a vision of chaos with conventional beliefs and the accepted secure way of things under attack. The imagery of it shows a world out of control that is disturbing, with innocence lost and the darkest of intentions prevailing. Yeats contends the best for allowing the worst to press with great intensity for the dominance of evil. The poem could describe the world that we inhabit today, although I think there may be glimmers of hope in the expression and passion of youth and the great movements for good that we've seen on a daily basis. And possibly, dare I add, the events of the American election as a triumph of democracy over common sense. I'd want to look at this idea of atomic leadership. It comes from the psychologist Jane Clear, who advocates small steps to change for great and positive outcomes. I'm going to focus, so this is my hypothesis. I want to argue that in times of challenge, we need to go back to basics, relationships, support and care for those we associate with. I want to argue for the reduction in large-scale government interventions in school policy and practice. And I want teachers and leaders to be trusted as professionals to know what is best for their pupils in the context of the work that they're operating, the world they're operating in. I'm going to look at Kelsey's research, and I'm going to intersperse it now with some of the research that I've been doing on the UK that is very poorly formulated at the moment. But Kelsey was a student of mine who did a master's. She had to go back to America in February, and we rejigged her master's dissertation. And this is the title that she came up with. And she looked at some leaders and teachers in America, in Massachusetts, and to try and give voice to the impact of the pandemic. And her research focused on 3 particular questions. And I'm going to focus on the 3rd one, to look at how leaders perceive their roles and responsibilities in the current times. And again, I'm just going to pull out from her research the research participants that were the school principals, So 3 school principals from different types of schools, and that's the data I'm going to focus on, whilst also mentioning some of the evidence that I've been gathering here in the UK. So the first thing that Kelsey determined were these sorts of themes that developed out of her research. And the expectations in America and both here in the UK were that teachers could suddenly deliver a new model of online learning with no time to change their teaching, to gain the knowledge to do this, have the equipment on hand. They were able to teach all learners and address all needs equally, and that learners would be confident and interested to commit to learning online. School leaders in her research expressed concern over the nature of online leadership. They felt it was very different from the many forms of face-to-face communication that they experienced during the school day. And one head mentioned forming a protocol team for communication between staff and parents. So he had concern about staff well-being, mental health, and safety of his pupils. Anxiety and desire always, when talking to staff, to be reasonable and be clear on his expectations. The school principals talked about changes in cultural practices, the mores of behaviour, in expectations. The 3 interviewed leaders themselves had varying abilities in using technology and competence to communicate in such challenging times. One admitted that suddenly their leadership weaknesses and limitations became more obvious. They appreciated that clarity of message was key, but sometimes struggled with what clarity looked like in times of such great uncertainty. They also noted the issues around time planning. Waiting for decisions from state were often delayed. And in America, there is a system whereby the superintendent model operates, and there were decisions both from state government and then also at the local level that were very delayed in terms of maintaining communication. One leader mentioned day timetables, days long, the meetings on Zoom, different platforms, all adding different pressures. Mentioned, as I've said, in Kelsey's data of time delays. And I think it'd be really interesting when I look at the UK to see how the interplay between the state and information played out for local teachers. There were great concerns again about the speed in which things happened, the need to make decisions with limited availability of information. I know that here in the UK, the DFE published a 17-page document that they expected leaders to work to. Sorry, the DFE guidance, 17 pages. So when I look at what's happening here in the UK, there are great elements of resonance here. I know, for example, that in some schools, head teachers experienced a lot of pressure from parents who wanted their students to be doing more. They expected more work sent home. High expectations of parents and pupils, and great difficulties for staff as well. Teachers under incredible emotional stress in the UK, trying to teach, trying to prepare materials, whilst also managing their own circumstances. Issues that need to be addressed. And a quote there from Bateson, leaders felt the need to help children feel secure, to feel comfortable, reduce grade expectations. And again, Kelsey's research does reveal that a lot of the principals wanted to take the pressure off. They wanted to reduce academic expectations on their pupils. And a quote from Principal B, it isn't all about academics right now. My teachers were too focused on grades, I would imagine because perhaps some of the pressures from parents. Need to remind people that this is a tough time. It's more to teaching than just the curriculum. Need for concise, open and honest information. And as a governor of a school here in the UK, I was privileged to see a letter that head teachers in Oxfordshire sent out, written to his staff the night before everyone went back to school. And I know that this was a time of great anxiety. But the letter went along the lines of this: I know you will be anxious, so am I. I know you will do your absolute best, as will I. I know that together we can do this. And throughout that, he referenced the name of the school, saying, team, name of the school, we can do this. I've also seen videos of head teachers in primary schools sent home to children. They were singing a song from Frozen, showing empty schools and empty classrooms. I won't be alone anymore. You're coming back. And these sorts of heartfelt letters, communications were things that really mattered in difficult times. The importance of relationships, this came out on very much in Kelsey's research. The difficulty around not having the face-to-face to continue building relationships with their staff. A relationship was going to be a priority when everyone returned. And I do know that in Oxfordshire and in America, there are still children not going to school. Parents are so anxious, they're keeping their children at home. There are children presenting with anxiety, and there are lots of pressures on people. And I'd just like to move to look at quickly the work of Professor Barry Carpenter and his recovery curriculum. I think this is quite pertinent at the moment. And he's received quite a lot of government support for this, but the importance of relationship-based approach as we go back. And Barry has very much talked about the need for compassion, a trauma-informed leadership. My approach is perhaps more directed at government strategists and I request time for schools to heal and time and space for teachers to work with their pupils to rebuild feelings of safety and security in the next generation of students. A little bit more about Barry's recovery curriculum. A more humane and compassionate approach. So the key messages that I hope I've tried to present, it's really odd presenting without getting any emotional feedback from my audience. I think I must work very much on looking at faces and looking for responses, but here we go. I think we will need to acknowledge we're going to have time to heal. Gove's approach of pushing ahead with the reform agenda is not what is required. I'm not advocating a return to pre-1988 by Baker Act, when schools did not, state had minimal influence in school strategy and curriculum, but I think it's time to ease off a bit. I think it's important that school leaders are trusted. We have to have a medical model where we respect the science of teaching and school leadership and acknowledge that we are a profession that does know what we're doing. If we're going to have change, then those changes must be, I must acknowledge the experience we've been living through and all that is expected. And an atomic model of change is small steps, and clarity and compassion is going to be essential as we move forward. So, I again acknowledge the resilience and great courage that teachers and leaders have shown. Many people I know have done this in the vocationally based professions. We need to acknowledge that. But we must have a future where we offer greater respect for those who teach, recognition of their professional expertise, and a political leadership that trusts teachers and leaders to make decisions about how school moves forward in challenging times.